It was a year later that after my father passed that I had a visitation from him. And even though my dad is speaking to me, I was fixated on this light that was behind him. And as he stood there, I could see behind him, over him. And it wasn't like there was anything really like decipherable other than the light itself. And it was just enormously bright, although it didn't hurt my eyes. And all I could think about at that time was, oh my God, that is home. This is where we belong. This is where we come from. This is where we're meant to return to.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, I've signed up for some stupid life thing, and I don't know why I'm here. And I don't want to be here anymore. I'm ready to go.
Well, have you ever wondered what the spirit world is like? Or have you ever wondered how to connect with your loved ones on the other side? If so, you're going to love, love, love my guest today. Shawn Leonard is an Indigenous psychic medium. He's the star of the APTN show Spirit Talker. And he's also the author of this new book of the same name, Spirit Talker, which I just finished and I loved. So welcome, Shawn. So excited to talk to you today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Karen. It's been, I get to do a podcast here and there, and I'm really grateful that you reached out and asked me to be on your podcast.
Yeah. So, well, I literally just finished your book this morning, which was great because it's very fresh in my mind. And in your book, you write about your early spiritual experiences, and you write about your seeing your deceased great grandparents when you were really young, and you're having this relationship with your spirit guide. But it seems like that experience with your father when you were 16 was really, I don't know, was that the experience that really started it all for you? I wondered if you could share that experience and talk a little bit about that experience.
Well, the experience with my father died when I was 15 years old. It was October 16th, 1987. And, I've had many spiritual experiences growing up, none that would ever say, hey, that I was unique or special in any, particular way. I thought every kid or every person had these experiences. Mine were a little bit different. I talked to them about them with my friends and my mom and as I went through life. And, as a shock, losing somebody as significant as your father at such a young age of life, obviously is going to make you or help you look at life a little bit differently. But it was a year later that after my father passed that I had a visitation from him. And when I had the visitation, I was still, going about my normal life. I never thought, hey, I'm going to be a psychic medium or anything like that. I just pretty much girls and getting a part-time job and playing guitar was all I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
As any young man would be. And then I would, so anyway, I slept downstairs in my mom's basement in the rec room. Being 16, having very long hair at that time and looked a lot more native at that time, I'd say. But I used to sneak out the window because I go out and hang out with my friends and come back, not early in the morning, but late in the morning, let's say it.
Yeah.
And so I did this successfully for some time until my mom caught on. But one night, probably about a year after my father passed, I snuck back in the window, and I would sleep on the couch watching TV or whatever, and then I would turn the TV off. It was around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning that I woke up, and I remember waking up. And I used to have these experiences when I was very young where I could pretty much go to sleep and leave my body and roam the neighborhood. I could pretty much fly around and go to different places and explore. And it seemed like I wouldn't go beyond a certain comfort zone, but I would always stay within my perimeter of knowing of where I was. But I had this experience that was out of my body. I could see myself sleeping on the couch. Was uniquely different because I didn't always see myself sleeping. And then at the end of the room, I saw this enormous, like the most brightest, wettest light I've ever seen in my life. And it just started off like this, the size of a dime, let's say. And it just grew larger and larger and larger. And I thought, okay, well, maybe because I'm seeing myself, I actually thought maybe I might be leaving this world. I thought I might be dying. And as this light grew larger to the size of a person, I walked my father. Now, my father, which I was very surprised to see. I was excited, but I was also like really angry too at the same time because, my dad and how he passed, he had a massive heart attack, and I was the one that was out there trying to resuscitate him. I was the one out there screaming at him, yelling at him, cursing at him to get back in his body. And even though I could tell that he could hear me, even though he was somewhere there, I could also tell that he wasn't going to get back in.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt it in my heart. I knew it. And so out walks my dad, and of all things, wearing a long white robe. And I thought, what the hell are you wearing, Dad? That's my first thought. I was like, okay, I was happy to see my dad. Second, I was like, my dad would never be caught dead wearing this. Literally, he'd be like, he was a hunter. He was in the Navy. He was on his way to work. He smoked. He drank occasionally on the weekends. He's not, not the guy that you would think wearing a long white robe type of guy, right?
Right.
Even if you're in the spirit world, you think that you might like hang on to some of that identity,
camo or camouflage.
Yeah, exactly, right. His checkered shirts or his lumberjack shirts or what have you, and this is what he was wearing, and then I realized that he was there, and I got angry. I almost not in the sense where I said anything, but he could sense and tell that I was upset with him, and he just told me to calm down, and I did calm down. And he said, I've come here with a few specific messages for you, and you need to tell your mom I'm okay. I'm like, you need to promise me that you can remember to do this. And I said, I absolutely will tell mom you're okay. And he says, you have to tell your brother that I'm okay as well. And I'm like, I will. I'll tell them both that you're okay. And even though my dad is speaking to me, I was fixated on this light that was behind him. And as he stood there, I could see behind him, over him. And it wasn't like there was anything really like decipherable other than the light itself. And it was just enormously bright, although it didn't hurt my eyes. And all I could think about at that time was, oh my God, that is home. This is where we belong. This is where we come from. This is where we're meant to return to. And for whatever reason, I've signed up for some stupid life thing, and I don't know why I'm here. And I don't want to be here anymore. I'm ready to go. And my dad got in my way, and he says, no, you're not coming in here.
You were trying to kind of bypass him and walk into the light.
Like, there's no way. I was like, this is not real.
Yeah.
This is reality. I want to go home to where reality is.
Yeah.
This has been a really bad camping trip up till now, and I'm ready to go home.
Yeah.
And he said, no, you can't come, Shawn. And he says, you have a purpose for being here, and I fulfilled my purpose. And he says, you're not going to understand this, Shawn, but I'm going to tell you anyway. But the greatest gift of love I could have ever given you, when me and you had made a plan on the other side before coming into life, would be that I would leave your life at this time and show you the light, because you're going to actually be helping people one day, and you're going to be, doing sessions or connecting to people in the light. And I said, okay, this sounded like stupid. It sounded like Yoda talking from Star Wars. This is like ridiculous. Like,
and I'm picturing you with your long hair. I feel like you're a metal guy or something. So
I was like into the hard rock stuff, playing guitar and all that. I was like Metallica and like all kinds of stuff. And anyway, I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. Like, I just want to go home.
Yeah.
And he says, no. And then he showed me two things. And very quickly, as if things were fast forwarding through my head, I had an image of what my mom's life would look like if I left. And I actually got to see and feel everything that she would go through. And it was really heavy, really hard and heavy. And even though my father passed and it was a year later, it would be another 7 or a bit more than 7 years that my mom would still suffer through grief. That would be very extremely hard. And then eventually she started to come out of it and start to live life again in some way, but never like quite the same. And then I got to see my brother. Now, my brother, he would get over me fairly fast, but that's okay. I tortured him. He was sort of that young man.
Is he younger?
So.
Younger
Yeah,
brother?
he was.
Okay.
He was my younger brother. I like, you pick on your little younger brother. So I think he was pretty happy that I was probably not around to torture him anymore.
Right.
As brothers do. And anyway, even though I felt and saw it, I was like reasoning with my father. I said, well, you know what? Mom will still overcome this. She'll get through this. And he says, no, you don't get it. This is not the path that is meant for you. He says, you will be helping people. And you have to remember this light. You have to remember what I told you. And then he touched me on the forehead, even though I was still trying to walk by him. And I just woke up. I woke up on the couch.
Wow.
And it was very, very like it was like realer than real. That's all I
Yeah.
can say. It was like realer than real.
Right.
And I thought about what my dad said, and I got up, and when my mom got up, I went upstairs and I said, "Mom, you're not going to guess who I dreamt of last night." I said, "I dreamt of Dad." And I told her what he had said and showed me and all this. And she says, and I thought she'd be happy, right? Because she was like really pissed off because she said, "Well, why did he come to you and not me? I've been praying for him to come to me." And I was like, but I have a theory around that too, because, we all have a process through healing and grief. And sometimes we can block ourselves from the people that we love is because we're in the heaviness and we're kind of lowering our vibration.
Right.
That there's a part of us that have to be responsible to raise our energy vibration, and through grief it's hard to do.
Yeah, because grief is kind of here and they're vibrating at this other frequency, so they just don't line up. Yeah,
they don't have any grief at all. They're in an unconditional loving space and place, and we have to lift our energy to kind of reach back, so that they can reach back to us. And I was at a different space of my healing than my mom. Even though I lost my father and I was grieving in my own way, my mom was still in the heaviness of it all.
Yeah.
And I was not in that heaviness like she was. So hence him coming to me.
Your dad was 42 when he died, right? Was your mom around the same age?
She was a little bit younger. I think she might have been 39 or something like that.
Right. That's so young to lose your partner.
I know. I mean, I'm 51 now, and I think I'm still freaking young.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I thought they were old, but now I'm like thinking, wow, that was really young. I mean, because we have no concept of time. When you're 15 or 16 years old, you just you can't, have that concept because we've not been there.
Right.
But now I understand, being at 51, how young, 39 or 42 really is.
Definitely. Yeah.
Extremely young. But obviously it was a pivotal point in my life.
Yeah.
Did I run out and think, okay, I'm going to save the world or help people or do sessions? No. I still play my guitar, chase girls, and looking for jobs.
Brush your hair.
Yeah, exactly.
Listen to Metallica.
But when you have a purpose in life, every one of us has a purpose, and it just unfolds. Yeah. I mean, especially when you step into it, unfolds even in a greater way. But when I finally, I grew up a little bit, and then finished school, spent some time with my grandmama in Newfoundland for a bit, and thought I was going to be a fisherman until an old girlfriend called. Next I'm off to Calgary, Alberta, but that's where I was meant to go.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I met someone else and had a few children of my own. Yeah, Mackenzie and Sienna. And so anyway, that's when I started to become more dialed in. I started to look at life a little bit differently. And I started to embrace more of a spiritual path. And not with the intention of like doing anything for anyone in that regard, except just living a more spiritually activated life.
Right.
And I knew what my mom went to church, and, very Catholic, that didn't serve me. It never served me growing up. It never spoke to me. And it's just, I was looking for different things. And when I went out to Calgary, I started to go to spiritual churches, and I started to, there was another place called the Center for Positive Living I went to, and I just started to, new thoughts, spiritual ideas.
Right.
And then I started to pray more. I started to meditate more. I started to get into this different level of energy. And when I started to get into that different level of energy, that's when things started to really kind of open up.
You started having experiences and
right. And
realizing,
it's not like I would not. I mean, I didn't do that with that in mind.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
It just started to kind of happen, and it was getting a little weird for a while. It was, and the more that I stepped into that spiritual path, the more I wanted to know, the more I wanted to learn, more that I wanted to understand. And, and it was like I was being taught, hence the book, through different life experiences, different aspects of, spirit and who we are, and the overall, principle of, even coming into life. And
definitely,
whether it's through reincarnation or even psychic abilities, it was just, things just started to happen. I never went to anyone. I was, to, seek training or schooling or education in relation to understanding the clairs or even psychic abilities. It was just something that naturally just started to happen. And then once I realized how that worked, like how spirit communicated, through me in this particular way. And I was seeing things, hearing things, sensing things. And it opened up a whole new understanding of like this whole connection. Then I started to want to know more about different psychics. I looked up Sylvia Brown. I looked up John Holland back in the day. I was like, these people are already self-actualized working in the field, right? So I watched them, and I saw how they worked with what they received, and it gave me the confidence to trust what I was receiving. And then when I did focus, even when I didn't know what I was really doing, just focusing, and when things were being given to me, whether it was like through clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, or what have you, I learned to trust it, and understanding that not everything is literal. Sometimes there's a kind of a figurative meaning, and they mean something else than what they're showing you to get you to go in a certain direction. You may not know that direction until you step into it.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
When you get there, it like leads to something else. Next, it's like, where I thought I was going with this is somewhere else. But but when you play a part, or when you're in the middle, let's say, as the medium or the person connected to spirit, you just have to trust the process.
And a lot of times you'll say things that you can't interpret it. It means nothing to you, but then you say it, and that the person, the sitter, knows exactly what you're talking about.
Right. I mean, like,
so beautiful when you think about it.
Story after story after story. And that's when I started to, I think when you do step into that spiritual path and embracing it, and once you understand how this kind of works through you, because everyone has different psychic strengths too. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't have all the strengths in some form or way. It just means you might be stronger in clairvoyance, or you might be stronger in clairaudience, or claircognizance, or however that spirit is communicating to you. And sometimes they all come together at once, right? It's just like you hear something, you see something, you feel something all at the same time, and you're like, okay, well, this makes sense to me, but maybe to someone else it wouldn't. And but that's how spirit works through people differently, right?
Well, it seems like, just watching your show, it seems like you're very clairaudient, because I don't really know anyone who can get names like you can. They're not like, and some of the names that come through are very obscure, right? So is that one of your main abilities? Is that clairaudience?
I'd say it's one of the clairs that I'm really good at. I've worked with other professional mediums like John Holland on Hay House, another Hay House author. And he told me I was probably one of the most clairaudient mediums he's ever worked with.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that's awesome. I mean, I think names are cool, but in different ways that they come through. I mean, sometimes you're telling people something, they don't know who you're talking about. I did this with because I have my own Spirit Talker tribe group where I teach people, and I had some people the other day, and I was did sporadic little readings for my students. And, this one lady was, I connected to her son or something like this. And he started telling me about Joe. And I'm like, well, your son's telling me about Joe. And so it must be somebody he really wants to emphasize. And obviously he's not Joe, because you just told me his name is Gabriel. Talking about Joe. Yeah. Right. He's talking about Joe. So who the hell's Joe? She goes, I don't know any Joe.
Yeah.
I'm like, you sure? Like, I'm pretty sure he's adamant that there's a Joe. And I said, okay, so there's no Joe, Joseph. She goes, oh my God, my other son's name's Joseph. I'm like, of course he is.
It's that amnesia that happens when someone's
like, but I mean, that's awesome. But there's for me, I mean, and that may be what people see from what I do. What I love is what spirit tells me that no one could possibly know except that person.
Right.
And one of the experiences on the show itself, Spirit Talker on APTN, in season 1, I was down in Acadia First Nation in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. I connect to this young girl who I don't remember her name offhand right now, but very vibrant, beautiful young girl in spirit who I felt like had children, but she had died from cancer. And she told me the type of cancer she dealt with and all this. She may have mentioned some names. And anyway, her mom stands up in the audience. And so I'm connecting to her, and she's telling me different things. And the mom is like really happy because she's been having a really hard time. But then she showed me something that I thought was odd. And it was so kind of odd and unique in a way that it made me feel uncomfortable. And because, I mean, here I am on TV being filmed, this is live. There's no script here. This is whatever's coming through is coming through.
Yeah, exactly.
And, they can edit later about what, who they're going to highlight on the show and stuff like that. But, there's people here, and anyway, her daughter does something that I've not seen done by only maybe one other person in my life during sessions, is she takes her shirt off, which is very uncomfortable.
Yes.
But she's wearing a bra, thankfully. And then her boobs grew in the bra. And I was like, okay. And here the mom I'm speaking to is crying, and I'm like,
Yeah. You're like, how do I
approach this?
Yeah.
What and why? You sure we need to go here? And I was like,
Yeah.
I was arguing with the spirit because I'm like, I don't really want to go here. Like, she's like, no. Then she did it again, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, oh, so I say, I'm so sorry, ma'am. I don't mean you any disrespect. I don't mean your daughter any disrespect. But your daughter's doing something very odd to me. I said, you must have done something with the bra with her. and you know what? She just, that crying, that heaviness,
Yeah.
turned to joy and laughter.
Oh my
And then
God.
the other two people that were with her were this young girl's sisters who weren't quite sure just yet.
Yeah.
Jump up and go, oh my God, it's freaking really her. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Because I don't know. I mean, when you're the middleman, right? When you're the medium or the person in between spirits, sometimes I'm the last to know, in a sense, because I'm telling you what spirit's showing me, but it means something to that person that I might not understood or might not understand. So she jumps up, and the two other girls jump up, and you go, oh my God, that's not her. And they're fighting for the mic at this point. And it's like, you're not going to guess what we did, because she always had a problem. She was a very small, tiny girl, and she always wished that she had bigger boobs. And then when she had cancer, she kind of like wasted away, and we saw her. So in the back room, when it was just mom and the two sisters, they took her shirt off, put a new bra on her that was bigger, and stuffed it.
Oh my gosh.
And put it back, and then she was on display, and here they are. They were kind of like laughing or chuckling to themselves during the service, because it was almost like that they were giving her last wish.
Right, exactly.
And so here she shows up with a bra that the bosom starts growing, and I was like, that'd be why she had done that.
I think that's like such a good example of trust for you as a medium.
Yes, but imagine, like, being in my head and having that take place, right? I mean, I think everybody could probably imagine that image in their mind as I said it.
Yeah.
That's very much what it's like to be a medium sometimes.
You're just receiving this imagery, these impressions.
Yeah. You may not know everything, how it's meant to unfold, or because it's not about us.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We're being of service,
right.
For spirit and also people, and being of service means you have to it requires trust, and whether you understand it or not, and exactly. You work with it to the best and the greatest of your ability. And sometimes things, what I found, even with some people I've read over the years, is that they may not understand right away. They go home and think about it like, oh my God, how could have I forgotten this? There's this amnesia, like, Joe or Joseph, right? But it's fun to receive those messages later and just kind of go, of course,
Yeah, exactly, because it's so specific and unusual. When some people think of the word psychic, they immediately think of predicting the future. That's just like the go-to, right? Which is kind of a misconception, one that I would like to rewrite. But I wanted to ask you, because in your book, you talk about, when you're talking about your father, one of the things with that visitation, one of the things he said was that it was his time to leave. And that was the plan before you or I were ever born. So I wanted to have this conversation for a moment about the future, because there was also a little quote in the book about events. Some events in the physical world cannot be changed. Long before we incarnate here, they were charted, part of a grand planned design. And I have to tell you a synchronicity, because the day that I hadn't read that chapter yet, but the day that I did read that, I had found one of my old kind of psychic journals where I would give myself readings, not every day, but maybe once a week or something. It was about 10 years old. And so I had found this journal, and I was reading it. It was this vision of the future. And what I had written about this particular entry is, this is set in stone. So it was weird that then I started reading your book and started, it was kind of like the same theme. But also, when I've given readings to other people, there's also a sensation that the future is fluid, and that if the person shifts their energy in the present moment, then the future will shift. And I call that kind of like your energetic trajectory. So you can kind of sense where they're going based on where they're vibrating now, but they could shift that. I just wanted to have a conversation about how both of those things feel true. where
Well, they
it
are
feels
true.
like, do you know what I mean?
Both are true.
Yeah,
Both are
exactly.
absolutely
I just
true. I
wanted to
mean,
hear your opinion on that or your thoughts
well,
on
I
that.
mean, you have a birthday.
Yeah.
You were destined to come into this world on that date.
Yes. Yeah.
We also have exit points.
Mhm.
Means there's, and it's that I say is not as set in stone. Maybe some people it is particular times where you're meant to go home to the spirit world, but
Mhm.
some people may have a near death experience and they're sent back because sometimes they're given an option whether or not they want to stay.
Mhm.
So let's say they have, I believe that we probably have at least 3 exit points throughout
Mhm.
our life. That there's times that if we've accomplished what we needed to while we're here, that we could leave. But
Mhm.
there's also exit points that if you're not going to accomplish what you feel like you're going to be here for, that you could also leave. That if you're off track, that means we have through the grand design of life,
Mhm.
there's points in life that certain times that we hope to meet.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean it's like set in stone that you can only go that route.
Mhm.
That you can still go a high road or a
Mhm.
low road.
Mhm.
And you can get, and some people like stay on their course of life throughout life, and it just
Mhm.
kind of unfolds that way.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean you don't have free will, because
Right.
even though I've had those experiences, I still have free will,
Mhm.
whether or not I would want to do sessions or be of service.
Mhm.
That
Mhm.
doesn't mean losing my father wasn't part of my path or plan.
Right.
And maybe to other people, maybe that wouldn't motivate them to move them through life so that they would be this person that I am today. And
Mhm.
that's okay, because there's different variables.
Mhm.
And we have many, many lifetimes.
Mhm.
So maybe the karma that you reach through this one lifetime is not all worked out in one lifetime.
Mhm.
And we may need several lifetimes to work out the overall goal that you feel like that you could accomplish if you're on your high road.
Right.
Right?
Definitely.
So operating
Yeah.
at a higher level of energy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, my guide talks about something called a divine blueprint, right? And then this is maybe what you're talking about the plans that we're making. When you talked about your dad and you guys had a plan for that to happen. And so this divine blueprint is there where we're kind of in the spirit world making plans and we're figuring out what lessons we want to learn. You also share in your book that experience that you had of that lucid dream where you visited the spirit world. And I was just wondering if you could also share. I think everybody wants to know what the spirit world is like.
Well, I've only seen glimpses of the spirit world. Like I see spirit all the
Mhm.
time, like in the sense of like having a connection through clairvoyance. And I've actually seen physical spirits. I hear spirits. I record spirits.
Mhm.
So I know they're around me. I mean, I have audible recordings of people talking to me. So I know I'm not a paranoid schizophrenic
Yes.
ventriloquist. Because if I can really record them, and I know I'm not like a paranoid schizophrenic ventriloquist,
Yes.
that's not happening.
Well,
So
also
there's
there's the bra story, so there's something to it.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, there's a tangibility of physicality that spirit can come in. But,
Yeah.
my glimpses of the spirit world, I do believe that we have like a life chart or life plan.
Mhm.
And again, I still feel like when you're on your path of life, and I feel like this may happen off and on, you'll know it. You'll feel it in your heart. You'll
Mhm.
feel it in your soul that you're where you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
And also occasionally you'll have little deja vus. So there'll be moments in your life where you say, oh, this is so weird. I've been here before. I've heard this conversation before. This has all happened before. It's a memory of the blueprint. There's like
Amazing.
a remembering
Mhm.
in a moment that you would conspire for everything to come together in this moment, is to say, put a little flag here to go, hey, I am where I'm supposed to be right now.
Mhm.
And so when people tell me they have deja vu, despite what's going on in their life, I mean, because not all things are meant to be like, some people pick really hard lives and really hard things to go through, and they know they're coming into life, and they say, well, throw it all on me. I can do it. Let me work through it. I'll find my way through all this. Throw
Yeah.
some of that in there. A couple bad parents, yeah, throw those in there too.
Yeah.
A couple of really bad child, yeah, throw that in. I can do it all.
I feel like from that place where you're in that light you were talking about, we're just almost overconfident. It's like, okay, I can handle it. And then you get here and you're like, I don't know if I can handle it.
Like, Karen, are you a mom at all?
I am. I have an 8-year-old. Yes.
Okay, so you have one child, and how old are you?
I'm 46.
So you're not having any more children at this point.
No.
But do you remember
I
how
hope you're
hard
not
it was?
telling me differently.
No, I'm not. No, I'm just saying it. Like life is like, giving birth to a child sometimes. It's difficult.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Talk about the most difficult experience of my life. We don't have to go there. We don't have to go there.
People
right
give them 10 years or 5 years or
Yeah.
they end up pregnant again and they're really excited about it.
Yeah.
It's like, but you know what, because even though it was a really hard thing that you went through and you struggled and you suffered a bit, but you know, and maybe you even had to have like a C-section or things like that. But
I did.
I know that's why I'm tuning into this.
Oh, now I'm getting a reading from Shawn, which is such a blessing.
It's like, but if you were to be pregnant again, I'm not saying you are, I'm just speaking hypothetical.
Yeah.
That you'd probably be joyfully happy. Despite the memory of what you've been through.
Yes, definitely.
And when we're on the other side, it's similar to that because, you know, when you're in a place of love, because when you think about new life coming through and with me and stuff, there's like this joyous, loving feeling glow that comes with women that I see that are going through this experience, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And they don't think about all the hardship. And so when we're on the other side in that light that is surrounding us, and we're like, put some suffering there and some pain there. We you know, sometimes we're overwhelmed by the amount. And I would tell people, you know, because we still have free will, is just, you know, put it out to spirit. Say, listen, I might have bit off more than I can chew here. You know, can you help me out a bit? Can you, you know, soften the blows? My guides, can you go to the counselor or talk to some people, work it out so this gets a little easier for me? Because I've made this way too hard.
Yes.
And I need it to ease up. So I just need it to ease up just so I can feel like my head is above water because I feel like I'm overwhelmed. Yeah. So please, I request this help. I ask for your help. I ask and make it so with all of my permission and all my heart. I grant it so. And just, you know, so then you're moving into alignment with that, right?
I love that.
You're avoiding all suffering. I mean, because you can't go from, you know, going through this, you know, struggle, drug addiction or abuse and maybe losing a home and losing your job to like having $1 million living in a golden house and, you know, and everything's just going to be good because of that. There's a process of work through to get to a space, and it doesn't even mean it has to be that. This means where you feel balance, joy, and such as the struggle of life. I mean, our struggles are planned.
Yeah. Well, that's what I've noticed is that even though in the moment I wouldn't be like, in the moment I'd be like, come send a helicopter, get me out of this situation. But then, you know, 5 years, 10 years later, it's like, oh my gosh, that was like, for example, with the birth of my son, that was probably like I thought I was kind of awake before that experience, but it kind of cracked me open. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like it
absolutely
like complete awakening. So are some of these challenges from the soul's perspective, are they put into our blueprint for the purpose of our awakening or the purpose of our evolution? Because it feels to me like, oh, once you understand that maybe that is the case, then that might make it a little bit easier when you're in the middle of the experience.
Well, in the one visitation dream that I went to the side, because I'm going to go back to talk about what you said, my experience from the other side. I had this very vivid dream, which I know I was on the other side. And many of us maybe have these experiences where, you know, that you're somewhere else and that there's beings. You may maybe not be able to make them all out quite. Although, you know, you're in a good space and you're learning something through the dream. So I was in a university. It felt like a university, and I didn't even know how the hell I ended up there. Everybody's wearing long white robes, and there's
like
a guy. Like my dad. Except like, and that's one thing my dad says is, "Don't worry, you're going to get used to it." A lot of us wear this stuff over here. So I'm in the university, and there's this guy beside me, and I can't quite make out his face, but he feels familiar. I don't know who he is, but I know he feels familiar. And the teacher's talking about how when we're writing our life path, our chart, through on the other side, about how it's embedded within our DNA itself. And then he started talking about, when we pick our parents and our genetics and family karma and a whole bunch of stuff that we take into account when we choose a life, when we're choosing to come into the world and what we're going to work through and what we're going to achieve or overcome, etc. I mean, he says it's not just your hair color, your eye color, and, the bad heart that you might have because it's genetically in your family that's written in your code of DNA. He says, but there's also lots of DNA that a lot of people in the world don't know yet. That your life purpose, who you're meant to be, your overarching life theme, it's written in there. It doesn't mean everything is written in there. He says there's a lot of what and he says they think it's junk DNA. That's what he said.
Yeah.
This is really not junk. He says that's where all the good stuff is.
I
But
love
he
it.
says there's variables, and he says you can even, doesn't mean you don't have choice or free will, but you've come into this life through this family, with your issues that you're born with, and the family that you have. That doesn't mean you couldn't even change family or what have you, but it's not, you've come into this world at this time, at this place, with these people looking like this, with your predisposed conditions. Do you think that's an accident? No, not at all, especially when we come from a higher level energy. And for me, it'd be like the connection to you're going to have to like figure out your connection to your ancestors and the indigenous people, because it's in your genetics, and it's part of your grandmom. And so the story is really intertwined about how my life has been unfolding throughout the time. And my dad's, of course, he wrote in his plan that he would leave. We made that pact, or that conversation, that he would leave this world. And because we've lived many lifetimes, and this is just one. Nobody over there is going, well, if I only lived to 42, that's really shitty,
Yeah.
They're like, no, get me the hell out of here. I want to go back home as soon as I can.
Yeah, and you can come back when you want to come back. So
right, and we could do this all again, right?
Yeah.
And with new experiences and lessons and people and situations, etc. And so on the other side, I was having this lesson about DNA and how there's actually a code written in the DNA, like a life chart code. And I was like, this is mind-boggling. Like, I'm like, this is, are you sure? And then I even asked this teacher, I said, like, am I supposed to be here? Like, I don't even know where the hell I am. This guy who sounds like Charlie, like, have you ever heard Charlie Brown's school teacher?
Yes.
Where he goes, wah, 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 wah. That's what my guide was sounding like. What the hell is he saying to the teacher? And the teacher goes, you're supposed to be here. We have to go outside now. I'm like, okay. And then, he takes me to, there's this rock quarry. I remember there's there's like rocks mined out everywhere, but in the rock quarry, we walk up to a plant that is growing in the middle of the rock quarry.
I just read this morning, and I love this story.
And he touches this plant with some type of device. Call it a cell phone, because I didn't even know cell phones existed.
Yeah.
When I had this dream.
Yeah.
That he touches the plant and shows me on the display who genetically this plant's parents were, like how long it's been there, what it's learning, its life purpose. And I'm like, you're telling me that plant and this rock quarry has a purpose and a life theme and everything? And he's like, every blade of grass does.
Wow.
I'm like, wow, this is really big for me. Then I woke up.
That's amazing. That was actually one of my favorite stories in the book, and I just read it this morning because of the reverence that you just feel for all of life when you recognize the purpose in it. So, and
I was reading, actually last night I was watching, because I don't watch much TV, but I watch a lot of YouTube. And one of the things I like watching that brings me joy sometimes is I like watching people's stories about near-death experiences. People who have died. And there was a guy that I watched last night. It was fairly new. I don't remember his name, but he had been deceased for an hour. And anyway, he was having this out-of-body experience, and he went to the other side, and he got to meet some people and see a bunch of things. And he was talking about how that they took him out to this field of grass, and it made me think about my own experience where we were touching the plant that was growing in the rock quarry. And he said it was like the grass spoke to him on the other side and said, would you like to lay on me?
Wow.
And he said he laid down on the grass, and he just felt like him and the grass were one on the other side. And there was like so much love from the grass itself, and just gratitude. And he just laid in that resonance of energy in the spirit world of how everything. And then he went to a stream, and even the water said, would you like me to put some of myself upon you? And he stood in the stream, and the water came onto him, and he just felt unconditional love. And it was like there was a consciousness, an awareness that is in the water, a spirit of the water, the spirit of the grass. There's and in Indigenous culture, I understand this because it's something I've been taught by elders, and we have a word in Mi'kmaq,
Mhm.
which is in all indigenous cultures, they have a word that means all my relations. We
Mhm.
say Emsit Nogema, which
I
means
was going to
all my
ask you how to
relations.
pronounce that.
Yeah.
MSIT. Say it
Emsit
again.
Nogema.
MSIT Nogema. Okay, because I can't
Yes.
pronounce any of the
K's
Mi'kmaq in the book.
Kaiser, yeah, they're all pronounced differently, but yeah, it's like
Yeah.
there's anyway, they don't always sound like how they're spelled.
Yes. Yeah.
So Emsit Nogama with the Kaiser would sound like a G.
Okay.
And anyway, that when we say that with our ceremonies, with our prayers, with our whatever we're doing ceremonial, we say this. When we enter a sweat lodge, it's the remembering of not when we say all my relations, it's not meaning that it's just me and the human nation that I'm related to. It's like my relation and connection to the grass, the trees, the ocean, the air. It's remembering that we're all one in spirit and we're all connected.
Yeah, and
And
we're all serving a purpose that's
right.
interconnected.
Yeah, because without the trees or the grass, we could not exist, or the water that we could drink, or the air that we breathe. I mean, it's without each one as an individual part, we could not be.
I know. So I have to tell you this story about a mushroom because it's right along this lines.
Sure.
Because last month, Canadian Thanksgiving, I'm in my kitchen and I'm getting these mushrooms out of the fridge and I'm washing them in the sink. And so I'm just washing these mushrooms and I'm noticing that I'm being really gentle with the mushrooms. And I just had this perception of what you're saying, that the mushrooms were alive, they were consciousness, that they were aware of me, that they were aware that they were going to be serving me, like to be my meal. And so if anyone had walked into the kitchen, because I picked up this one mushroom, I'm looking at it, it's like it's looking at me, and I started just having this relationship with this mushroom. Like I couldn't believe it. People would have thought I was on something, but I was like fully
type of
conscious. Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't that kind of mushroom. It was like a cremini mushroom. Anyway, so I was having this relationship, but I had this overwhelming feeling like the mushroom was so ecstatically happy that it was going to be serving my family as my meal.
Right.
And it was like this profound experience in my kitchen. And so now whenever I'm preparing food, I have that awareness, like, oh my gosh, the consciousness in all of life, and it's all serving each other, and it's amazing, and so much reverence for that, right?
And when you become conscious of that, right, you can there's this inner connection that you have with your food, your water, the air. I mean, even just that interaction, just say, well, I'm grateful for the nourishment that you've given me, and I'm grateful for the life that you've served so that we can be at one in this way. So I'm grateful. Thank you. You can even speak that to your water, and that's why when I teach prayer in the book, right, I probably reference in the book too, I'm not 100% sure because I don't remember that part, but Dr. Emoto, with the power of words and water.
Yeah.
And he has a book out there where he, tapes words and intentions to just water and then crystallizes it. And you can see how the intention, the word taped on water itself changes the crystallization of the water.
It's amazing. I have that book. Yeah.
Right. It's an amazing book. But if you think about it with, with the food, the, everything, the air that you breathe into your lungs, everything has that awareness and spirit. And it's like that interconnection to remember that it's that, that you're that Emsit Nogama, you're all related.
Right. And it seems like the Indigenous, culture has that reverence, or maybe that's what modern culture is missing, is that reverence for our interconnection, which, by the way, Shawn, I think is what psychic ability actually shows people. Because in order to connect psychically, we would have to be interconnected with each other. And so isn't that a beautiful demonstration of our interconnection, right?
I mean, yeah, because you're taking the unchangeable, unphysical that you can't perceive in the sense with your physical senses, and then making it tangible and perceivable so that you can be a receptive person to receive it, to give. Because, I mean, we are going to be guided sometimes for ourselves, obviously. Yeah. I know my guides speak to me here and there all the time, shoving something into my brain. And, sometimes I'll be talking about one thing and they shove something else in my head. So, oh, by the way, you better tell them about this story. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going over here.
On the topic of guides, there's a question I've been dying to ask you on the topic of guides. So I'll just tell you this quick story first, is that a few years ago, maybe it was 2017, 2016, 2017, was when I really was like, I'm going to meditate every day. And so I started that practice. And shortly after I started that practice, within a few months, I became aware of this, what started as a blue light on my left-hand side. I wasn't aware that it was a guide at first. I was just aware of this light. Over time, I recognized that as a guide. You know, it was kind of like developing the relationship, and she became closer and closer. At some point in time, Shawn, I became aware that her energy was very, I would say, cosmic. Cosmic. And I became aware that I would describe her as a star being. Now, up until that point, I had absolutely no experience with this whatsoever. I had a lot of experience with psychic work, mediumship, absolutely no experience with this star being thing, right? So I was a little uncomfortable. But when I was doing my research, what I discovered was that there are so many stories of Indigenous people being connected to star beings, so they, in Native American legends, they refer to them as star people or sky people. I read that the Hopi actually believe their ancestors are from the Pleiades. So the question that I've been wanting to ask you is, are there any stories or legends in Mi'kmaq culture of star beings, or have you experienced any connection or communication with a guide of that nature, either for you or someone else that you've been reading?
Well, there is one that I've been talking to more recently, and I don't know if he's a guide yet or not, but I know he's been connecting to me off and on, just out of the blue. He would reach out, but it's not too strange to think. I mean, maybe, and I'm going to say the likelihood, because I mean, life has existed in the world for I don't know, thousands of years, but the amount of people that are here now is far greater than the amount of people that were here a long time ago. We didn't all originate here. We've come from other planet systems. We've come from other stars. The evolution of the spirit and soul is only contained within Earth, but other planets. And once we finish with our procession through this of what we need to learn and grow, or in the service of humanity or the world itself while we're here, the chances of us moving somewhere else is probably very, very probable, very likely. And I would say that you've lived lives in other planets. I would say this for sure. And in Mi'kmaq culture, in many Indigenous cultures, especially Mi'kmaq culture, we see the Milky Way as the spirit road. So when you look out at all the stars in the Milky Way, when we believe that we leave this world, that sometimes our spirit goes back to the Milky Way, and that light is part of, I mean, we were once stars ourselves, for God's sakes. We're the byproduct. Everything that you see physically that we are is a byproduct of a star that is not died, but transformed.
Yes.
That's created the molecules, everything that was out in space. So we're not separate. I mean, even just like the water, if you can imagine the water, the trees, the grass, that you're one with, but you're also one with all of the starlight out there. And because you're made from it. We are it. Yeah. We're light in this physical form as we are now. It's not an accident that we circle a sun, which is a star, and they know now, science knows now, that every star has planets around it. I think 1 in 4 or 5 have habitable planets, and based on a certain prediction. And it could be greater than that. And I'm not 100% sure, but I know it probably is greater than what we probably think. And, the star people that may be guiding you or helping you it could be your ancestors from another lifetime, that, it's very probable that you have people that are from other places or have lived lives and maybe never an earthly life yet, but still deeply connected to you and work with you in life to help serve humanity in a greater way.
Well, it does feel very much like family when I'm tuning into it.
It is family. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. We're all related. I mean, there's no separate. We're all from the same source. We're all brothers and sisters.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's so that star guide of yours, or I don't want to call it a guide. You said you're not sure if it's a guide.
He says his name is Eben.
Oh, Eben. Okay.
I don't know why he goes by that name, but he says his name is Eben, and he's been talking to me off and on, and I'm not sure. This is what I'm not sure of yet. because I'm still connecting to them. Now I have my three primary guides right now, because I believe that we all have like about four spirit guides that are with us, that are your main guides. I mean, in Indigenous culture, we say that there's four spirit animals, one for each direction. But I also feel like at different phases of life, there's different guides. Like when I was young, I had Sam, and then I had Victoria. In my youth and my adulthood, I have Eliza, who is a new guide that is working with me that I don't hear very often, but she's kicking around somewhere.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the fourth stage of life, like the elder part of your life, there may be a new guide that presents himself. Maybe he is, and maybe I'm older than I know. Who knows? But and it could be Edmund. But I'm open to working with them and the wisdom that they share, and maybe this is something that will unfold more with time. But it's not too strange to think that, if you have like human guides that have lived lives and that are on the other side of this world, that you couldn't have beings from other worlds that are also working with you. It's, there is beings out there. They're visiting now. And I think next year, I'm going to tell people to be prepared, because I feel it's going to be very public that it's coming out that, the government is going to have to announce that they've actually, they either have bodies of beings that they have crafts.
Yeah.
And some branches of government right now have admitted to that. Even though they're not all on the same page.
Yeah.
There is people that are announcing that there's beings that we have that have either died or that they still may have. I'm not sure if they're living or not. I mean, they'd be living in spirit no matter what.
Definitely.
Because they have a spirit too.
Well, that's what's cool, Shawn, because because it feels very much like mediumship when I'm interacting. So do you know what I'm saying? So maybe it's the spirit of a being from another star system.
I would say star people. I mean, because we're evolving. Because let's just say if they're visiting our world and they're from advanced places, which they are. I mean, there's pictures and videos and things. I mean, the U.S. Navy's got videos of these things coming and such. That and I think even from my understanding that the things that they fly around in don't even have controls.
Right. They're just maybe a telepathic or a
consciousness. So they've
yeah.
advanced in their civilization as people or star beings or star people to evolve where they don't need things like this. So that means we're on the same evolutionary process.
Yes.
Because if they're ahead of us in this way, that means there must be an overall arcing plan for all beings to eventually move into that same space where we become very psychic, very connected, and maybe don't need to not say, hey, Google, but probably Google's going to hear me now, but we don't need to say Google, we just think it, and it just, and that consciousness will come to us.
Well, it's so interesting, because I was aware that obviously the connection with this guide of mine is telepathic. And when she was communicating, like, she was making me aware that her entire civilization is telepathic. So I was thinking about that, like, wow, can you imagine what that's like? And then having that telepathic connection with maybe, like you said, their technology or whatever it is. It's just fascinating to me.
Well, we're moving in the same direction, as humanity. I mean, there's been people like us around forever, it's not a rare or new thing. It's not like, pre-biblical times and everything. I mean, there's been people that have been connected to spirit, forever.
Yeah.
And it now, which I'm really grateful for, I mean, the times are shifting in the world look at us. We're having a video conversation. You're in London, Ontario, and we can see and talk to each other. And there's going to be people out in the world that can go on a little digital device and see that conversation.
Yeah.
And, that we're evolving as people very quickly, not 200 years ago, we were riding horses, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And now look at us. We're talking on video from different places.
Yeah.
But our spirit is evolving too. And even the faith or belief system that's existed in the world up to now, which has served, I guess, its purpose. We're elevating our consciousness to become more psychic, become more connected.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a natural state of humanity in the future. I'm hoping that it's sooner than later, but I know that it takes time, and it takes people to come in to, like you or me or other people, to kind of shift this awareness or consciousness, because that's part of our purpose.
Yes. Yeah.
And I feel like when you're given an ability to understand something, especially in Indigenous culture, when you're taught something as an elder, it's meant to be shared. You know why? This is why when somebody asks me like yourself, could I be on your podcast? I'll say yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's because spirit wants me to share whatever I can, like you are,
Yeah.
to help people understand that concept greater so that we can all move into this understanding together
Definitely.
of what psychic abilities are. And it's not like, again, waking up and as your toast pops, the Lotto 649 numbers.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
stupid is
Why
that?
haven't you won the lottery yet, Shawn Leonard?
Well, you know what? I've dreamt of the numbers. Trust me, I've done it a few times. I actually even got I've got 5 in the bonus once. And I always seem to get that one wrong.
Yeah. Oh my
But
gosh.
how would that change my life? Would I be here today fulfilling my purpose
Yeah.
in this way if it was as easy as like the toast popping up and having all the numbers for the Lotto Max tomorrow?
Right.
I'd
Exactly.
probably be in Aruba or Hawaii or somewhere else and getting a really horrible suntan. But there's, it would, if everybody had access to that, I mean, I don't think that's what psychic abilities are.
Yeah.
Psychic abilities are about that telepathic communication, that connection, that understanding, that universal connection, that wisdom, knowledge that comes, to and through you, whether it's connected to spirit or other people.
Yeah.
And it's greater than thinking about, well, you're not really psychic if you don't get the numbers to the 649.
Yes, exactly. Well, let me just share a vision I had too, because it kind of speaks to what you're saying about the future of humanity being psychic. I don't know when I had this vision, but I had this vision of the future human, and it was a clairvoyant vision where everybody's heart was lit up green and glowing, and it was leading the way. And so after I had that vision, this is years and years ago, but I was aware, it's like, oh, the future human is heart-centered. So when I read your bio in your book, it says you're a heart-centered psychic medium. And I was like, oh, he's part of my people. He's like, he's got that heart-centered. So, I mean, that's my hope for the future. And I'm sure that's your hope too, because from the heart knows our interconnection, right? And so making decisions, acting from that place, it's a much different thing than acting from a place where you think that it's just you and you're just separate and there's no interconnection there.
I mean, imagine in spirit, I mean, we only come from an unconditional loving space. There's no fear. I mean, you can't be living in fear in the light. It just doesn't exist. We come in here to kind of go through that and experience that, but to learn who we are in a sense. And this is a kind of a story as well. Like it was the same life, the past life experience that I was watching last night, which I think was very profound because he met his guide whose name was Drake. And he's like, he didn't even know he had a guy named Drake. And he's like, okay, apparently I have a guy named Drake. And they walked out to a field and he says there was a fence in the field. And he says, well, you can't go beyond here because, this place, to go beyond this fence on the other side, is for people that don't have any prejudice.
Wow.
And he goes, well, I don't have any prejudice. He goes, like, I love everybody. Like, and my sister is Black. I have a Chinese sister, that are adopted. My family's adopted, and they're all different cultures. I have no prejudice. He goes, well, tell me what what do you think about people who are prejudiced? He goes, well, let me tell you about the people who are prejudiced. And he goes, and then he would go
prejudice against the prejudice.
Exactly. Right. It was like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So it's real, like he says exactly what I'm telling you,
Interesting.
And I had a guy recently message me who was kind of rude, he was rude. And, you can be triggered, people are going to trigger you in life. And it's about how you learn to grow and become greater than the way you've reacted in the past. You don't have to be the same person all the time. You can grow into your authentic self, which is this heart-centered person. And I had this guy who was Indigenous message me from Ontario somewhere. And he said, and he messaged me something about, well, you must be like Buffy St. Marie, a fake Indian. And I'm like, well, an Indigenous wannabe. And I'm like, well, I have a status card. So, my grandmama's Mi'kmaq and my kids have status cards. I'm pretty sure, according to the government, genetically, I'm Indigenous, whether you like it or not, I am. And then he said something, and then he started attacking my spirit or spirituality and connection to spirit. And he's like, well, then you should go back to your spirits and blah, blah, blah. It's all a bunch of baloney, and I don't believe in that bullshit. And I'm like, And I said, well, really, you know, I wish I would really like it if you would respect people greater, and especially honor the Indigenous people that are stepping into roles, considering you're an Indigenous person. And I said, you know what? I wish you nothing but good things.
Mm.
I wish you wellness in life and positivity and good things to come to you, and hopefully a really good aspect of how you see all people in a good way.
Mm.
And then he said something else to me and just kind of brushed me off.
Ah.
But, you know, maybe what he was looking for in relation to attacking me is not what he got.
Mm.
Because if you're approaching somebody and you know, if you only have love within you and
Mm-hmm.
you only come from that heart-centered place, because if that's who you authentically truly are,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean I've acted that way my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been angry. I've gotten angry at my wife, for God's sakes, about stupid things.
Yeah.
And you know, and we've argued about this or that, not like big ones, but just little tiny arguments here and there about silliness. And then after you think about it, like, why did I act that way, right? Why did I say we're human still? It's about learning and growing and becoming
Yeah.
better than you were.
Yeah.
And that's that soul's progression of like moving into that space of becoming better than you used to be, or
Mm-hmm.
greater than you used to be. And if you can change and you can be this authentic person coming from that heart center space,
Mm-hmm.
when people approach you, not from a good space,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, just approach you, and however they approach you, how are you going to teach that person?
That's such a good point.
What's going to shift them if you
Mm-hmm.
approach them with anger or frustration, or some snarky remark back,
Your
right?
triggered response.
Right, your trigger response. So you have to learn to shift that into, because maybe he thinks about this, and just think, maybe it's like I call it planting seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say we planted a seed in that man's spirit, his light there somewhere, because I know there's light in him.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that seed takes a little while to grow, but he thinks about how maybe he acted.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of silly. Maybe in 2 years he messaged me, he said, you know what, I'm so sorry.
Mm.
Thank you for wishing good things to me, and all that. It's, you know, it's not what I expected to get from you, but not that I need that reciprocation in the sense of like saying that to me, because that's egotistical. I don't need that. But you just don't know what can happen if you plant seeds like that. And if several people plant seeds like into this man's, because there's obviously something that he's gone through in his life to have that experience, to act that way, to, and eventually, if there's enough people that don't react or don't jump into the drama that he wishes to create, then he'll realize that what he's creating is not really, it's not serving anything.
Definitely. Okay, so with all of that in mind, here's the last question. If there's one thing that someone could do to kind of, one practice, one tool, one technique to connect with the spirit world or to amplify their own intuition or psychic ability, what would that be?
One thing. Listen.
Listen.
Because, I mean, prayer is the activation of speaking and requesting, but if you don't have stillness, if you're not mindful, and if you're not listening, then you won't be able to receive anything. You have to create space for that in your life. So you can invite, you can do all these different things, but ultimately it boils down to being mindful and listening.
I love it. Thank you so much, Shawn. Many blessings to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. You too. Thank you for having me on.